The southern part of Florida is much more than a paradisiacal destination of beaches and warm temperatures. Florida also holds chilling mystery stories, such as the one I am about to tell you today. I first heard this story about 15 years ago when I was in college. Almost every weekend, I went with a group of friends to the Florida Keys, and one day we decided to go to the last key accessible by car. There, we took one of the tours offered in the oldest part of the city, and the guide mentioned this story that took place there in the 1930s. Karl Tanzler was a German radiologist working at the Key West Marine Hospital. There, in the hospital, he met a local beauty, a Cuban-American girl, Maria Elena Milagros de Hoyos. Karl was enchanted by the girl's beauty and took that meeting as the sign he had been waiting for. According to his autobiography, when he was a child, he was visited by the apparition of one of his ancestors, Countess Anna Konstantina, who revealed the face of his true love, an exotic young woman with black hair. According to the story, there is no evidence that Elena was interested in Karl, who was 32 years older than her. In fact, when Karl first met Elena in the hospital, she was legally married, although she did not live with her husband. Her husband had abandoned her after she lost a pregnancy. However, Karl promised Elena and her family that he would cure her with therapies he created himself, therapies ranging from X-ray sessions to electric shocks. Treatments that were evidently useless for the tuberculosis that was consuming Maria Elena. Karl seized every visit to offer gifts to Elena, jewelry, expensive dresses, but nothing seemed to win the girl's heart. Unfortunately, on October 25, 1931, Elena succumbed to the relentless disease. Devastated, Karl asked the family for permission to build a mausoleum for Elena in the Key West Cemetery, and the family agreed. For 2 years, Karl went every night to visit the tomb of his impossible love. According to court records where he would later be accused, the radiologist opened Elena's tomb and took her away in the darkness of the night. Like Dr. Frankenstein, he restored every part of the decomposed girl's body. He connected bones with piano strings, replaced decomposed eyes with glass eyes, made a wig with Elena's own hair falling out of the decomposed scalp. He cleaned the abdominal and thoracic cavities and filled them with canvas to sculpt the body. He replaced sections of necrotic skin with silk bandages soaked in wax. Later, he bathed the body in a mixture of chemicals to stop decomposition and get rid of any foul odor the body might emit. Then, he dressed the body in expensive dresses, jewelry, and copious amounts of perfume. Elena's body rested on Karl's bed, where every night he consummated his macabre love. This unholy union lasted for 7 years. Every night, Karl played Cuban music on the record player that Elena loved so much. But in a moment of carelessness one night, he left one of the front windows of the house open, and some neighbors saw Karl dancing with the corpse. They immediately notified Florinda, Elena's sister. Florinda confronted Karl at his house and demanded to see her sister's body, but Karl refused, claiming that it was the spirit of the sister herself who had asked him to take her out of the tomb. The Monroe County Police were notified and arrested Karl immediately. When the police entered the bedroom, they found macabre findings. On the bed lay the preserved remains of Elena, dressed as if she were alive. Forensic doctors examined the body and confirmed the consummation of necrophilia. The news attracted the press and many curious onlookers who filled the streets of Key West. After completing the necessary examinations, Elena's body was displayed in the Lopez Funeral Home in Key West. Over 6,000 people paid their respects to Elena's desecrated remains. Eventually, the remains were buried again in the Key West Cemetery in an unnamed grave to prevent the remains from being stolen again. Karl was evaluated by psychiatrists, who concluded that he had no psychiatric problems and was indeed competent to stand trial. Karl was charged with deliberately and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a corpse without proper authorization. But luck was on his side, and he was released on a technicality because the statute of limitations had already expired. The statute of limitations is basically the time window the prosecution has to accuse and prosecute someone for a crime. This time had passed, and there was nothing to be done. For years later, Carl moved to Pasco County north of the city of Tampa here in Florida. They say that the last years of Carl were hellish. Neighbors saw strange figures, heard strange noises and screams coming from Carl's house. They said he spoke incoherently and claimed that a woman would not leave him alone. That a dark entity inhabited his house. He said that Elena appeared to him at night, asking him to find her body, not to leave her in that cold tomb. On July 3, 1952, Carl died in very strange circumstances. He was extremely thin and had a look of terror on his face. Carl's body was found 3 weeks later in the arms of a mannequin with a death mask that Carl had made of Elena. Another version says that he was indeed found 3 weeks after his death, and wrapped in a sheet, Elena was found. Her body was decomposed and modified. They said he had bribed one of the cemetery employees who had given him the location of the tomb and had helped him unearth the body. Once he got hold of the girl's remains, he left Key West and moved to Pasco County to continue living his unholy romance. The second story we have titled, The Sudden Death of the Doctor's Daughter. Carrie was the youngest daughter of Luis, the town's doctor, and being the youngest and the only female, as the other 2 sons were males, Carrie was the spoiled one in the house. Carrie had married Marcos, a young surgeon who had been a student of her father, Luis. Marcos was an excellent person, studious, empathetic, an excellent human being in all areas. The wedding was celebrated, and Carrie went to live in another city with her husband, but the marriage would be short-lived. Carrie was the complete opposite of Marcos. She used to snub people, mistreat others, and Marcos was a bit disappointed. Marcos volunteered at a clinic for people without resources, and there he met many humble people, some of whom he occasionally encountered on the street. Marcos warmly greeted all these patients regardless of their social status, but Carrie found it ridiculous. So, in the face of such behaviors, Marcos decided to dissolve the marriage, and Carrie returned to her parents' house. Now, not only did she despise the town, but she also found it degrading that her husband had left her. And if Carrie was capricious and selfish before, now she was bitter, and her heart was filled with hatred. The only refuge she found in that town was the church. Since her father was the only doctor in town, no one contradicted her, and she reached a point where even the old priest of the town was under her capricious orders. Months later, a new family arrived in town. It was a couple with their son. The boy, although he seemed shy, was very good-looking, and Carrie began to take an interest in him. But she had no way of getting close to him, so she convinced the priest to welcome the family and invite them to the church. On Saturday afternoon, Carrie went by the priest to greet the new neighbors. Hospitable, the neighbors welcomed the visit and offered them something to drink to relieve the heat. Impatiently, Carrie asked about the boy. "His name is Felipe, but we call him Felipito," said the mother. "She went out to bring some things to the store, he'll surely be back any moment. We're going to open a small market in 2 weeks. In fact, we're looking for help. If you know someone trustworthy that we can recommend, we would appreciate it very much." Carrie immediately offered to help. The priest looked at her incredulously, knowing perfectly well that Carrie had never worked. But the priest didn't dare contradict her. The next week at 8 a.m. sharp, Carrie was there, ready to start working. She refused any form of payment and made it clear that her father had enough money. The new neighbors accepted the help, but without knowing the cost it would have. For a while, everything was fine, especially when Felipito was around. Carrie was all love. But then things started to get complicated. Carrie noticed strange symbols in some places in the small market, small packages wrapped like charms in cartridge paper. Something didn't seem right. Carrie convinced Felipito to go to the movies. The boy didn't seem particularly interested in her, but there weren't many options in that place. While watching the movie, Carrie and Felipito kissed. Unconsciously, Carrie rested her face on Felipito's shoulder, staining his shirt. Carrie asked him to stop by her house first to clean it, as she didn't want Felipito's parents to get a bad impression. When Felipito took off his shirt, Carrie inspected the young and well-formed boy's body. While looking at him, she saw strange marks like symbols. Carrie didn't want to be indiscreet, but curiosity got the better of her. "What are those marks?" "They're the marks of my initiation. We practice Palo Mayombe." Carrie's blood ran cold. Because this is one of the most stigmatized Afro-Cuban religions. Many people see this religion as diabolical or as a type of black magic used only to harm others. In Carrie's rigid mind, it didn't fit that she was dating someone who practiced that religion. She decided not to make a scene but quickly cleaned the shirt and asked the boy to leave. Carrie started searching the store but found nothing more than the symbols. Oblivious to what was happening, Felipito invited Carrie to his house when his parents weren't there. Carrie saw the invitation as an opportunity to find out more. When she arrived at the house, she asked to use the bathroom. She took advantage of it and checked the rest of the house. In one of the rooms, she saw iron cauldrons full of sticks and chains and other items. She quickly left and demanded an explanation from Felipito. A bit embarrassed, Felipito explained that his father was a Tata of Palo. This title is given to priests of this religion. Carrie began to insult Felipito and his family, calling them Satanists, ignorant. Faced with such attacks, the boy tried to explain, but she wouldn't let him. Carrie didn't return to work at the market. And that Sunday, when she saw Felipito and his family enter the church, she made a huge scene, accusing them of Satanists, witches, and child murderers. The priest tried to intervene and explain to Carrie that this was God's house, and everyone was welcome, but Carrie didn't stop her attack. Felipe, the father, cast a look at Carrie that chilled her soul. That look was so powerful that it left her speechless. Felipe apologized, and the family left the church. The priest and other parishioners tried to convince them to stay. The truth was that the new neighbors were very loved by the people in the town. They were helpful and kind. But faced with such shame, they decided to leave the church. After that event, Carrie seemed strange. She didn't eat, sleep, or want to be alone. She said a demon was pursuing her, that surely they had done witchcraft to her. Not even a week passed when on a hot day around 1 p.m., Carrie was walking from her house to the church, a relatively short distance, maybe about 6 blocks, when suddenly she collapsed on the ground. Several people came to her aid, but Carrie did not regain consciousness. When they brought her to her father's office, there was nothing to be done. Luis thought she had probably died of a stroke but requested an autopsy to be sure and made sure to be present at the autopsy of his own daughter. To the surprise of the forensic doctor and Luis himself, her daughter's body showed no cause that justified her death. The news spread like wildfire in the town. The accusation of witchcraft that Carrie made before dying began to gain strength. No one went to the family's market anymore, and the neighbors ignored them in the street. The skeptics said it was impossible for witchcraft to have killed Carrie, but they still had their reservations. Faced with the rejection of the town, the family decided to leave and put the store up for sale. That same afternoon, after putting up the sale sign, Felipito went for a bike ride. A few hours later, someone knocked on the family's door to report that Felipito had had an accident and had died. For many, that was the payment that the Tata received for taking Carrie's life. They say that those who use such means to harm others will have that harm returned to them. That family left the town, and they were never heard from again.